Hey, it's Rob. Welcome to Axel's Garage. We are out here with Cosmo again. It's our 2000 Jeep Cherokee, and I haven't even done the editing on the videos we did. We did rear brakes, we did front brakes, placed a whole bunch of stuff on it. Things been running great. Haven't even edited those videos yet, and my wife was driving it. So here's how the story goes. My wife was driving the car. She used it for about a week or so. I was doing some work on her IROC, so she was driving this one. And she calls me up and she says, when I put my foot on the brake, it's pulling real hard to the right side, to the passenger side, and I'm smelling like a burning smell. She described it as burning rubber, but if you have a wife that tries to describe things to you over the phone, you know what I'm talking about. That burning smell could be burning rubber, it could be a belt burning up, it could be that asbestos-y burning brake smell, which that's what it was. So she said it was pulling hard to the right. I told her the baby is getting back home, and when she got home over the phone, because I wasn't home, I said to her, I said, just go feel the wheels, the aluminum wheels, the black part of the wheel. I told her, feel towards the middle where the lug nuts are, and just give me a feel on both sides which one is real hot and which one isn't as hot. And when she did that, she felt the driver's side real hot, passenger side just warm. So when I got home, jacked it up, spun the passenger side wheel, spun fine, go to spin the driver's side wheel, and so what do I got? I got a stuck caliper. Now, we just did the brakes recently. Both calipers, pistons went back in, everything was lubed up, everything was done good. So of course we had to, bake the new brakes, but doesn't look too bad. What I did do was, and it's just a habit of mine, is if I'm going to replace a caliper, I'm going to replace that brake hose. If I'm going to replace that brake hose, I might as well replace that caliper if they're inexpensive. And these are, I got an AC Delco caliper, and I got a Robestus brake hose. The brake hose is like 15 bucks, caliper is like 20 or $30, whatever it might be. They're not that expensive of a part. So in this vehicle, if I'm going to break that line open and have to bleed it, I'm going to replace both of them, especially on a 21-year-old car that the kids are using mostly and my wife is using mostly. I'm just going to replace them. So that's what we're going to do today. I jacked it up, took the wheel off, and luckily, if you remember when we first got this, every time I was under it or had a wheel off or anything, I was spraying all the bolts in the front end, suspension, everything down with PB Blaster. I had bought a gallon of it in a big spray can, and I was spraying everything down. Why? Because Jeeps like to rust. We're in the Northeast, and I knew eventually I'd be replacing stuff and fixing stuff, and just to make it a little bit easier. So hopefully that worked. So I took the wheel off this morning, jacked it up, and I hit it with a little Deep Creep Seafoam, which is my favorite penetrating oil by far. I'll link it in the description below, along with the other parts that we use today. So I sprayed where that brake line goes into the brake hose. You want to make sure you're not just getting it where the threads are, you're getting it where the brake hose fitting rides on the steel line, because that's where it likes to rust in there. And we'll break that free, and we'll show you what we have to do to replace this brake hose and brake caliper. So down here where the brake line comes into the brake hose, we sprayed this real good. You want to get it on that steel line so that it drips down and gets between the nut and the steel line. You also want to get it in here as well. So we sprayed it. I got my line wrench, which is a 3/8 in size, and I just gave it a little wiggle back and forth, and once I got it moving and it broke free just a little bit, I sprayed some more Deep Creep in there and just kept working it back and forth and working it back and forth until it got worked in nice where I know, okay, now it's loose, and then I'm going to bring it back and I'm just going to not snug it, I'm just going to give it a little close, sort of. Now you got a T40 Torx right here, and that's what's holding the brake line on. You want to make sure you got that free. Once you got that and these are free, then we can work on the caliper end. I don't want to start on the caliper end because I want to make sure I got everything free here, because this would be the hard part if I had a hard part on this job. So just a tip, if you throw a rag over your caliper and your upper ball joint here so that you don't get grease all over yourself, sometimes it makes it a lot easier. Go in with a T40 Torx. All right, and we got that out most of the way, so we know we're good there. Now what we can do is get the caliper bolts out and get this caliper off. We're probably going to have to pry the caliper a little bit. All right, so now that that's loose, we're going to take the caliper bolts out. We're probably gonna have to pry the caliper a little bit because the caliper is seized. I guess I could open up the brake bleeder to try to loosen it up a little bit. Maybe I'll do that. I'll open that brake bleeder up, and hopefully that will allow me to dribble out a little brake fluid, and maybe we can get the caliper off easier because there won't be that clamping force on it anymore. Hopefully. If the caliper's, piston is completely frozen, and even bleeding out the brake fluid's not gonna cause a whole lot of, make a whole lot of difference. So I got 2 caliper bolts, and they are a 12 millimeter. And we'll get them out to start. Now, we just did a brake job, like I said, on this. So all these parts are well lubed. So I'm gonna try to put them on a clean rag, keep everything clean, because we already cleaned all this stuff up and lubed it. All right, I did put a lug nut on the rotor just to hold it in place. And pry this caliper off. All right, caliper came off pretty easy. Pull our brake pads out, try not to destroy them. All right, what I'm gonna do now is just check the brake pads. When the caliper is stuck, you wanna make sure that you didn't heat it up so much where the brake pads are really cracked and falling apart. These don't even, I got a little tiny crack in the middle of this outer pad. The inner pad looks real good. I'm hoping that, she didn't drive it enough to generate so much heat to really screw it up. The rotor seems okay. There is some surface rust on it because it's been sitting a week, but everything else seems to be okay. So we're just going to be replacing this mess here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my, should I do this? I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to clamp off this brake hose so I don't drip brake fluid all over the place, and then I'll take off the banjo bolt on the caliper itself, because although the caliper and the brake hose came with new banjo bolts, it did not come with came with new washers. It didn't come with a new banjo bolt, I should say. So I'm going to take a little pair of vice grips and I'm going to clamp that hose, and then we'll take this banjo bolt off. Man, that's all tight. Wow. That is tight. Alright, so I got my banjo bolt here. I'm just giving it a little clean, make sure the hole is passable. I'll spray a little brake clean in there. Alright, because on the banjo bolt you can see you got a hole there and a hole there. You got to make sure that your hole is good and clean. So I just sprayed it out with some brake cleaner, which flashes off real quick, doesn't leave a residue behind. Alright, so I can leave that there. I usually don't do this stuff on the hood of a car, but this particular one doesn't have a whole lot of niceness in the hood. So I got 2 new caliper bolts. I'm going to save these and use my old caliper bolts because they're already lubed up. I'm going to make sure that my sliders are good and lubed, and they are from the factory. Check this one. They're lubed up nice. There's 2 washers right here on the red doohickey. There's also 2 washers in with the brake hose. And the only other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to crack that bleeder off. Alright, I'm going to take this bleeder out almost all the way, just like that. And I'm going to grab my white grease. And I'm going to put a little white grease on those bleeder threads, because lube your threads, especially if you live in the Northeast. Be nice to the next guy, because the next guy, yeah, he may very well be you. Just lubing them up just to prevent rust from getting in there. And now I can get my brake hose out. So in my brake hose bag here is a couple of crush washers for the banjo bolts, so I'll take that with the original caliper bolts that came with the, oh, it was a Ziploc bag and I ripped it. I'm a dummy. I like when they give you stuff in Ziploc bags that you can hold on to. Alright, well, I am going to fold it up like this, and this is going to go in my box of XJ spare parts, so that when I'm looking for something in the future, I can go right in there. So now we can take a look at how this is supposed to go on. Did I not pay attention to that on the other side? Let me go look. So looking at my old one and the curve into the block here, I know that the bolt goes through this side. So I can pop off my red cap, take one of my crush washers, put it on the banjo bolt, put the bolt in that way, take the other crush washer, put it on the other side of the banjo bolt. Okay, and I can thread it in like this, but I am going to thread it in enough so that I can either move it this way or I can move it this way before it gets in the groove on the caliper, because I'm not sure which way it's got to go over on that side. So in the meantime, just to prepare my caliper like you would do any other brake job, I'm going to take some brake lube and I'm going to go right around the piston over here like I would do any brake job, and I'm going to put a little on the ears of the caliper just like I would do any brake job, and I'm going to put a little right here where the brake pads slide, just like I would do any brake job. And we're not talking about a ton here, just a little bit, just to prevent corrosion between your moving parts. Corrosion bad. And anything that you might have got where you didn't want to get it, wipe it off with your finger, and then we can go around back on the other side. Alright, so back here on this side I still got my brake hose loose, but I know it's oriented correctly, I just don't know which way it's got to go. I pop my brake pads back in, and I'm going to pop this caliper on. Okay, and I am going to finger tighten my caliper bolts, and then we can figure out the way that brake hose has to go. This bracket needs to go like that. So now I know where my brake hose needs to be and the orientation there. And that's in there good. So now I can take my 14 millimeter on my banjo bolt. The banjo bolt, it's pretty tight because you got to crush those washers. We're going to check it for leaks once we get it out, but now my brake hose is going to fit just like that, and it's going to be nice and put a nice soft curve in it. No issues. Okay, so that's pretty loose. What I'm going to do is pull out this T40 Torx that holds it in, which is pretty rusty. I'm going to put a little white grease on that. So a little white grease on that. Now I can bring this up. Just like that. And we can tighten it back up. Alright, now I just have to spin out. Spin out my brake line. One drop out of the way. Right, snug that down. There's my rag. There's my rag. Wipe off the brake juice. It dripped all over. I'm going to crack the bleeder open and let it gravity bleed for a few seconds until I see a little drip coming out of the bleeder, and it's coming out. Alright, so it took about a minute and a half, 2 minutes maybe. Brake fluid started flowing out of the bleeder hole. So now what I'm going to do is wipe all the brake juice off, and I'm going to give this all a little spray with brake cleaner and let it flash off before I bleed it, so I can tell if there's any leaks in the banjo bolt. And then we'll do our one-man bleed procedure with my sports drink bottle that I like so much. Take my one-man bleed container right there, my tube, wrench on first, wrench, tube, crack it open. Make sure you got enough brake juice in the master. And this one I could actually see when the bubbles stop, because I can stick my head out the door here, put my foot on the brake. More bubbles in there, so I can close it. I was actually able to see where the hose goes into the bleeder when the bubbles stopped, which when you're doing it by yourself and it's another wheel, you can't see that. So what you wind up having to do is just pumping it a lot of times and going through more brake fluid. Didn't have to do that in this situation because I could see it there. I'll link a video in the description of how you could make. I'll also link you could buy a commercially available one if you like. I'll link that also in the description. I am going to clean up my tools, leave the rags here. I'm gonna go get some brake cleaner, just clean everything off so I can put my foot on the brake and we can check to make sure I don't have any leaks. I'm not spraying the brake cleaner on the things that I lubed. Just spraying it there so that we'll know whether there's any leaks or not. All right, so I put the wheel on, torqued the lugs down, topped off the brake juice, go for a ride, all is well. Did it in record time videoing it because baby mama has me running an errand. That's it today. I'll link everything we use in the description below. And as always, thanks for watching.